So there's a little. Your program's a little misleading. There's nothing on crime. Last year, if you remember, there was some rumors going about crime, so we wanted to address those. So this is really just about traffic safety. So what is our mission? Obviously, is to make sure that our 80 miles of roadway are safe for our pedestrian and motorists alike, and that takes a lot of different efforts. So we partner with the engineering division, namely with Aaron Schrager, working with a lot, because the 3 E's, whenever you want to attack a traffic issue, you're going to have education, you're going to have enforcement, and then you're going to have engineering as well. So it's kind of a step process instead of just going to redesigning a street or just doing enforcement. So every year we have the perception versus reality problem. This is a comment we hear every year. Someone has a serious issue with speeding, car accidents, pedestrians being hit and or killed. Sometimes that is a reality. A lot of times it is a perception. I think we've had incidents in this court or in this council chambers where we've had some members of certain streets come and talk, and then we've done traffic studies and things like that, and it wasn't a speeding issue. It might be a volume issue or things like that. So Ashland Road, that was one. We definitely were hearing issues with speeding. We did studies for that for years, and as you know, there's some calming devices there now. Canoe Parkway is another one on our target. It's a very wide. One thing that was really interesting about Canoe Brook is we figured where the island is from Woodland out to 124, that island was kind of like a traffic calming, especially when other cars were parked in front of the residence. We did a traffic study. The speed's actually higher than the portion that is wide from Woodland all the way up to Bedford. So that's because we were thinking maybe we'll just do an island all the way. Obviously, that's not going to happen now because people seem to go a little faster. This is a big one we always hear, and that's why it's in red. Central Business District. We always hear, my kids can't walk uptown. People are diving out of the way. There's accidents, a lot of deaths and things like that. I'm not going to talk about pedestrian fatality because they always say, but we'll just say from the first year I was chief, second month I was chief, in 2011, we had 2, and we'll just leave it at I have a pretty good record up to now, so we won't mention any of those words. And then the other one was Woodland, which was by far our biggest issue of speeding. We put in the speed humps. We're still doing studies, as you do after you put in traffic calming devices, and the speeds actually are still a little high, so we're looking. We may put in more or other different traffic calming, but when you come off of River Road, and then once you pass over Canoe Brook, you have a straight shot basically to DeForest. So, and it's a cut through to get to the downtown. Butler Parkway is another one. I think that's a capital budget project that's coming up. That's another one that's very wide, where you look down and you tend to be going a little too fast. And then Bryant Parkway was one that we still keep getting that they're flying, they're cutting through. That was one we did do a traffic study on years ago, and then last year it wasn't a speeding problem, but a volume problem from either coming off 24 to get to 22 or Springfield, or vice versa, coming out of Springfield trying to get onto 24. So the volume there was so we put in some turn restrictions, and we're still working on things like that with the neighbors. So motor vehicle accident history. So this is always one that's interesting. So 2012, 978, 2013, a little over 8. 2014 kind of stayed even, went up a little in 15, went down a little in 16, 17 went up to 913, and where we are to date is 851. So, and just some of the stats to kind of show you. So time of accident, it's broken down into 4 time frames. The most accidents are from noon to 6 o'clock at night, which kind of makes sense a little bit. Day of the week, anyone want to take a guess?
Thursday.
Look at you.
How about that?
Wow, Thursday. So obviously, most of the factors into these accidents are driver inattention. Anybody want, Mary? You can't answer this, but anybody want to take a chance? What's the biggest accident type?
It's gonna be parochial school. Hit and run. No, I mean rear end.
Rear end. Yes, rear end. But also, like I said, we have 80 miles in Summit. But 20 of the accidents were on the state highway, which we responded to, and on private property was 134. So that 851 is actually a lot less on our actual roadways. And for the age and gender of the drivers, Males, you always hear that it's the high school kids. It's not. It's
I'm sorry, Chief.
21 to 30.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you say on people's own property, what do you mean? Do you mean people live
It
their own
it could be
house?
7-Eleven or like things that are
Oh, okay.
Parking
Parking
lots.
lots.
parking lots. We had a pedestrian last year,
Okay.
which, when you heard pedestrian hit, the mother ran over her son's foot in King's parking lot. It's still a pedestrian under the
Got it.
guidelines
So
of
it's
the.
parking lots. Okay.
So, yeah, parking lots, things like that. So the age and gender of drivers is not the high school kids. 21 to 30 is the most, and for females is 41 to 50. And so that's it for those. So, and pedestrians. So this is the one where we do hear a lot. So 2012, we had 18, 13, 9, went back almost doubled. 2014, 15 stayed the same. 2016 went up a little bit. 17 was 8, and this year to date is 10. Now, obviously, myself and the whole Summit Police Department would like those all to be zeros, but we can't be in every car. But when you hear of these, when you hear a pedestrian hit, you unfortunately do think of the person being struck and flying through the air and seriously injured. And like I just mentioned, it could be as minor as a he said, she said, which we'll see one this year, where a person said they were brushed by a vehicle and the driver's like, I didn't, and there's no really evidence that it happened. So to break it down, so this year we had, and the font obviously is a little small, Broad Street and Chestnut, pedestrian struck in crosswalk. That was a serious accident. Springfield and Hobart, most of these are in the crosswalk, if not all of them. And when that happens, the driver does get a summons. But it's also the other way if we have 2 or 1. Or last year we had a few where the pedestrian was out of the crosswalk. And if they go to the hospital, we do meet them up there and we do give them a summons for not being in the crosswalk. So usually they're kind of shocked about that. They usually say, I was hit by a car, and we're like, well, you weren't in the crosswalk. And we get through that. So Orchard and Morse, minor injuries. That was a left turn. A lot of pedestrian accidents across the nation are left turns. Kent Place Boulevard in Springfield. This was a bus turning, and there was a he said, she said. The mother said that it hit the stroller. There was no evidence that it hit the stroller. But we still obviously take the report. Kent Place Boulevard, Morse Avenue, minor injury, again, left turn. DeForest and Maple, side mirror brushed the individual. Actually, no injuries. DeForest again, same one. Left turn one. Springfield and Woodland. This pedestrian was in the crosswalk, but she basically walked out and got hit. Where the driver, it was proven the driver had no time to stop. And then Maple Street in Ashland, this is where a jogger was struck. That was a unique, the driver actually stopped, looked at the jogger looked at and they kind of went back and forth like, you go, no, I'll go, you go. So then the jogger said, okay, now I will go. And at the same time, the car went and hit her. So that was kind of a unique one. And then the last one, we had a jogger run into a car. And had some minor injuries. Education, we'll always outreach you with local organizations, whether it's the running club, we do PSAs, bicycle safety, with the local biking groups. Traffic studies, we're always trying to gather data so that we have it. So if someone does come forward and says, can you, they're going too fast, or there's too many cars, what have you. So with the new traffic unit, which is obviously a year old now, we're trying to gather that data to always have it, where we don't have to also wait for a resident to say there's a problem on the street. We might identify that and take action that way. We work a lot in the high school driver ed classes we go to. Sack the Phone was a new program this year. Share the Keys. So we're in the schools a lot to educate because they are our future drivers and we want to set the tone well. So engineering is a big one. So four-way stops, some had never had them. We now have them. Hobart and Springfield is one that's coming. There's been a lot of studies. That's our worst intersection there. So we put in the blinking, stop signs. We've looked at sight lines. We just still try to figure it out. It warrants, like I said, we work with the engineers. It warrants actually a traffic light probably if you wanted to get there. But a four-way stop I think is going to be a good one. And we talked about in public safety and then possibly a raised quadrant in the middle of the four stops would be the second phase. So both Whitridge on Essex and Hobart, and if you drive that now, it's a world of difference. Just on Essex, where you had to keep creeping out with them redesigning the roadway, in addition to doing the four ways, really has been great. Maple Street in Oakland, we did get a lot of feedback that people were still running it. It was new, but that is near school, and you have to change behavior. And sometimes summonses will change behavior because there's a consequence, but we were out there. I don't think it's happening as much. So that's a good thing. But it's just an education part of it as well. Blackburn Pine Grove was actually the first one. We put in the speed humps. They're different than the speed bumps, which you see in malls and parking lots. That they're very narrow. Speed hump is almost like or another name is a table. You go up and over it. We have Woodland and Ashland, and when they went in, I'm not going to lie and say that we started not getting. We got a lot of emails, telephone calls. You know, can you do our street? Can you do this? And so, but there's all, as Aaron's not here tonight, but obviously there's a lot of guidelines of where you can put them, where you cannot put them. There's a lot of data collection that has to go into it. And then even once they're installed, then there's follow-up traffic studies and things like that to see if they are doing the job that they were intended to. So roundabout, we actually looked, when I say we, it's really more Aaron, but we had discussions on Whitridge. We wanted to look where the four-way stops are to do roundabouts, because that is one of the new traffic calming, and they're attractive, and but there wasn't enough area to do it. But on Canoe Brook, there is. So we are looking at that, and if you went down Canoe Brook, you would have seen there were 3 or 4 barrels in the middle by Huntley, and people were like, you know, was there construction? They forgot to pick up their, but it was good because you came down to it, you slowed down because you didn't know what they were, and then you went around them. So we're looking at that, and then the chicanes is if you want to look that up, it's an interesting concept. They're like little bump outs, and they're decorative. They have flowers and plants on them, which don't block the sight line, so you kind of slow down and kind of have to go around it. So it's a traffic calming device, and Canoe Brook is wide enough, and Butler might even be one that they could look at those as well. Bollards, you're going to start, you're seeing these a lot because they're not permanent, but we can change behavior. We were having problems in front of the middle school drop-off where parents, in their rush, because they're not leaving early, so once again, a lot of these issues with traffic is everyone's trying to get to point A, B, and C within 5 minutes. You have to leave a little earlier. So we talked with the school. They were having problems. We put the bollards out there, and it's really changed. We also put them, if you were ever coming up to that mid-block crosswalk near the promenade, there was like spaces right before the crosswalk that if you had a small enough car, you might think that was a parking spot, even if the back of it kind of hung out a little bit because you were running in to get coffee or what have you. So we put one each there, and it's really changed because we obviously don't want someone stepping out in the crosswalk and a sight line's blocked because there's an illegally parked car. So those are working as well. We also, we put the bollards down on in front of like Thompson's, La Faccia, Marco Polo on that side. We were having a problem there with a studio where people were dropping off, and it was causing problems. So we did put them there. We did, which is not in here, we did have a mother and daughter that were struck last week in the crosswalk, and I did receive some emails, and I answered one today saying that the lights were activated because we just put a pedestrian signal there that they were activated. I have video of the whole accident. The lights were never activated. Even if they were, I don't know. It was totally driver inattention. He was looking to his right, not speaking out of turn. He's already put in his quote statement. He was looking to the right, and he thought the car was stopping for him to pull out of Arbery. And then he kind of went faster because he saw a car going around that stopped car, which now with the bollards, that can't happen. And he struck the mother and daughter who are doing fine. So the bollards are working where we have them. We also met with SDI, Aaron and I, to designate some delivery truck parking spaces. And that was brought up in a council meeting not long ago. And those will be put down, I'm assuming,
probably early March.
Okay. So those are certain spots that will be designated. We'll work with SDI to educate their vendors of where they should and shouldn't park, because we're always moving them, whether they're on a crosswalk or near a crosswalk. We understand that they have to, get their products in, but we have to educate them as well. Improved signage, the blinking stop sign I talked about at High Street and Hobart, we put one in. Fog lines were painted to minimize road width, so it gives a visual that the road's narrow, slows people down. We plotted every stop sign. That was an ordinance that was revised. We put in the crossing signals, which you're seeing more and more. The first one was at Broad and Elm, and then Morrison Weaver, DeForest and Norwood, Morrison Elm, which will not only help the students that when the crossing guard's not there, if they're staying late for whether it's sports or activities, that they can cross if they want to go downtown, what have you. That'll help, but also the commuters that are using the lots and then walking to go into the area behind the middle school. And it's a little dark there. We did upgrade the lighting, but I think that's going to be a really important PED system. And then Morrison Aubrey was just put in. So now we get to the more under, my watch. So enforcement. And sometimes enforcement has to be done because obviously it sends message. So we're a little over 9,700 motor vehicle stops to date. And that does a lot of things. It obviously changes the behavior of the driver stopped, whether they get a summons or not. And that changes the behavior. It also changes the behavior of others who then self-check their driving habits. Like, they look down at, am I going too fast? Or, the summit officers are, I see them all the time stopped. So I need to make sure that I'm following all the guidelines and motor vehicle laws. And then the other one is that old, you never know what it does, and you can't really log this, but it deters potential criminal activity. So you may have some elements that are coming in that are looking to whether they're to hit cars or shoplift or what have you. When they see all these motor vehicle stops and they see the cops pulled over and they see that, they know it's a very active police department, they may say, you know what, why take a chance here in Summit, and let's move to another town. So, but you never know that. There's no stats to track that. But I think that is a big one. So summonses. So in nines, we have over 5,000 issued to date. And the traffic unit alone is 1,000 summons to date. And in addition, and what's important to that is the traffic unit is also teaching DARE, also doing traffic studies, a lot of education, they're training. So the two officers that are in there, or actually three, Sergeant Daly oversees them, and he's a pretty active sergeant, pulling over cars and things like that. We also just, as we acknowledged maybe a couple council meetings ago, we now have a motorcycle, which is also going to be used for traffic. But what's the bottom line? The Summit residents really need to set the example for all the drivers and pedestrians, because if we really break all these numbers down of accidents and summonses, I'm going to take a wild guess that majority of them reside here in Summit. So we need to set the example not only for other drivers, but for their children and everything like that. So if we all kind of leave a little earlier and slow down, we're not all in a rush. Progress, so for the 7 consecutive years, we've received awards from AAA and other initiatives that we've been part of, and we continue to get different awards for how proactive we are, as well as reactive when we do see an issue and we address it. But for us to help you, we always say, we need to hear from you. So you can put it on Facebook, you can put it in all these special groups, and they talk, and I always wonder, you're talking to other residents, but the one person that probably could really address your issue is me. So reach out to me, and I'll take care of that. One perfect example was the officer we moved from Summit and from Kent Place and High after the bridge opened. And the first 2 weeks of school, there was a lot of chatter on the Facebook groups. Death is coming. Just everything. Everything calmed down. We never heard another peep. We haven't had any issues there. So, but again, no one reached out to me or to Lieutenant Ritchell or to any officer saying, hey, can you put the officer back? It was all just back and forth on Facebook. So I'm asking you, we're here to help. It's teamwork makes the dream work. You have to let me know. So there's two up there, either me, anybody in the Summit Police Department is their first initial last name, and then at spdnj.org, and we actually have a special traffic email, which is just traffic at the same email. So with that, I want to thank definitely the mayor, council, especially our public safety, which is the mayor, Mike Rogers, our chair, Matt Gould, and Councilman Steve Bowman, who will be leaving us, and we'll have a new public safety chair. But a lot of things are discussed, and initiatives are put in. But the whole council works with getting us the traffic unit and the equipment we need to make Summit a safer place to live, work, and visit. So with that. All right, I took a couple breaths, right?
Took a couple of breaths right there. Thank you very much,
So,
Chief, for a very
any
informative
questions?
discussion. Yes, so I'll open up for questions, comments, folks. On the dais. Matt?
Thank you, Council President. I'll make a quick comment. It was a great year. It was my distinct pleasure to work with you and this fine department. And a couple things you didn't mention regarding traffic. You were out in the worst weather directing traffic during storms, whenever really bad things happened. You know, you guys are the first ones out there. School traffic, I know I had an issue with Washington School that you fixed up right away. The middle school, the bollards on the side so the parents can't drop their kids off there. Anytime that they see a problem, they fix it. And also stranded motorists, when I did my ride along, I was just very impressed. There was a motorist that had a flat tire, not even a Summit resident, not even really in Summit, right on the border, but the police helped him get the toad and everything. And so just in addition to all these great, I think, very impressive stats, thank you and the department for that.
Thank you.
Above and beyond work.
Thank you. In the old days, police departments were like warriors, and one of my favorite sayings is I think now police departments are more guardians than warriors. I mean, they can step up definitely when they have to, but I think it's all about teamwork and just helping, right? It just makes the Summit better.
I have a question, actually, Chief, which actually maybe it's really for Paul, or it's actually for JCP&L probably than any of you guys. But the lights, I've noticed that the lights that we have with the LED lights, they have this nice bright glow, right? And you can see very precisely people. But then these overhanging JCP&L lights, they have this like yellow, pinkish, whatever color, orange color that they are. It's really difficult. Like when I drive, I have a hard time seeing, and they're the ones that are closer to most of the crosswalks than our lights are. Is there a way that we can talk to them about those particular lights, not necessarily switching everything, but,
Sure. So, Council President Rob Walton, who represents this region and is the government liaison to JCP&L, he did offer us, and he did speak at a council meeting, and he did offer to replace some of those lights that you're seeing, the sodium vapor, which has a yellow tint, with LED. We're trying to compile locations which we think intersections with crosswalks should be our priority, but then move on to other areas. So we're looking at right now compiling a list for him. He's willing to take that list and start installing LEDs based on our priorities, so we can do that. So if anyone does have locations that they feel need upgrading as far as lighting, they've been very responsive to the city, even adding lights to locations. So if anybody does have any locations they would like us to evaluate, I do work with the police department. They go out in the evenings and evaluate those areas once once somebody submits a location. So I'd be happy to continue to work with them and have them installed.
Thanks, Paul. By the way, does that mean that we're sharing costs with them, or it's just that they're willing to do it?
No, they've this first round they've offered just to replace them.
That's wonderful. So I think we should take advantage, and probably in the early part of 2019, let's just make sure we get them a pretty good list, and let's start working on that, because I find it sometimes just difficult in the night. There's this, there's really, especially people who are wearing dark clothing, and then you get out there, and then sometimes I notice on our lights, it's so clear. I'm like, oh, there's a big difference. Okay, anybody else? Mike?
Thank you, Chief, for all the statistics. One thing you mentioned, which I continue to have people talk to me about who are very concerned about safety, is I say, well, we have this traffic unit, and one of the things is enforcement, your 3 E's. And I have heard from a few people that have said, I never see people getting pulled over. But just doing the math real quickly, it seems like we're pulling over like 36 people a day and giving summons out to 20.
Right, and we're doing like 35,000 service calls a year as well.
Right.
And 2017 was 3,400.
Right, so
summonses, and we're over 5,000 already.
So that's a real number, and I know I've seen it, and I tell people, I see people being pulled over, and I think there has to be a pretty clear message out there that if you speed and you don't stop at red lights and don't stop for turn on red, you're going to get a ticket, which is important. I'm just curious, though, one of the things you said for the summonses, there's like 5,000 in total and 1,000 on the traffic unit. Can you just explain the difference to the public? Because I know council approved the traffic unit a couple of years ago, and it was a big initiative to promote safety. And what is the difference in the different parts of the department on doing those two things?
So the marked units, you see the black and whites out there, that's the patrol unit. So they're answering their calls, they're, whether it's medical or crime, or what have you. They're the ones that are going, those officers are going to all the service calls. Traffic was put in, as you said, just for traffic. So those two officers don't, unless we're down manpower, they don't answer calls. So their main focus is just traffic enforcement, education, and doing motor vehicle stops. So just the three of them, a sergeant and two officers, that they're doing 1,000 up to date so far is pretty impressive. That they're out there stopping cars and issuing. And then patrol is the rest, but they're also answering calls. One of the problems with when we would do radar, you have to go through a whole tuning forks. You have to set it up because it's a machine. You'd set it up, and the next thing you know, like car 7, a medical at 123 Main Street. And then they'd go. And then they would go back and set up again, go. And then after a while, they're like, I'm not going to even set up. So traffic, knowing that they're not going to get service calls, can do the radar. And we're definitely, with the motorcycle, once the warm weather comes back, we're definitely going to see the motorcycle with the handheld, kind of like the good old South, behind the building, on the motorcycle, waiting. So,
Chips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I might have to take a lesson how to ride a motorcycle. But, so you're going to see, it's really a really good proactive and reactive in a sense if we're having a problem. But the traffic unit has been phenomenal. And that's because of, the mayor and council giving, the extra officer and the equipment and things like that.
Oh, I'm glad it's making a difference. And then one last thing, I was going to save this for, I think, a resolution later, but, or it was on stop sign, so it was the ordinance. But since you brought it up, I just asked you now, when you mentioned on Springfield and Hobart about a light, my personal opinion, it needs a light, much more so. I mean, a stop sign is great in the interim, but what can we do to speed along the process for looking at that as another alternative?
For traffic signal?
Yes.
That would be engineering. There's, like I said, there's certain guidelines, very costly, but we want to see, because there's really not a lot of sightline problems. It's kind of weird where people will stop and then pull out and get hit. And there's really not, there's a little bit of a bend, but there's enough time for you to see a car coming around that bend. So it is unique that is our worst intersection.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives on that corner, and
probably hears it all the
somewhat
time, right?
Facetiously, he says, yeah, whenever I want some entertainment, I sit on my porch and I watch people crash into each other on that
It's amazing. So
corner.
I think the thought process with public safety and engineer was, let's do the four-way stop. A little more cost efficient, but see what that does. But Aaron, and I don't want to talk for Aaron, but he always can keep looking into the guidelines for a traffic signal. Because once the four-ways go in, the accident history might plummet. It may not, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh,
I'm
Mary.
going to just jump off of what Mike said, only because I don't want to bring it up later. But I worry about that intersection too, and what I guess I'll ask you a favor is, like with Maple and Oakland, as much little stop signs, it's coming here, because that is a worrisome
So you mean
spot.
once the four-way,
Yes, once it goes in, just as much
There'll be stop ahead, there'll be the large stop.
Yes.
And Aaron and his men are really good about that. The one at Oakland, if you remember, 'cause the first stop was really small. Not the
Yes.
sign, the stop bar.
Right.
Where it said stop on the pavement was really small. And we heard from you and from residents that it's a little small. And we made that font big, right? So it just, you want them to know that it's not like, we're not trying to trick them. Like, oh, there's a stop, and so we can generate, tickets. Just so everyone knows. I hear that a lot. Well, if there's a problem, let's just say Woodland, just hire a cop, and all the money from the tickets will pay for him or her. As you know, we do not get that much from the state for a summons. And you can't generate revenue. It's like a double tax, right, by pulling somebody over and giving them a ticket. But yeah, so we'll definitely work with Aaron and his staff to make sure that there's enough signage leading up to the stops. Because it is going to be,
That's a
we'll
big,
put
big
officers
change.
there for the first couple of weeks, just
Oh, good.
lights on, just to monitor, to make sure that people are seeing it. Because people do, we had one person that went through the Maple in Oakland, and when the officer said you went through a stop sign, he said, no, there's no stop sign there. Never touched the brake. Wasn't even a California roll, just right through.
Yep.
Because he had been going that way for 15, 20 years, and the mind, starts doing what it does.
Steve?
Laura,
Oh,
ladies
Go
first.
ahead. Oh, thank you. You have said
Yeah.
a couple of things that I wanted to say, but I won't repeat. Thank you for the presentation. And to your point about letting you know, you're very responsive, so people will send me emails or texts or call me, and I forward it to you, and that's the way to get things done. So either, they certainly can reach out to me, but directly it makes most sense to reach out to you, rather than just, grumbling among their neighbors
Right.
or posting stuff on Facebook, because that's the only reason we can't do anything else we know about it.
And if we
So-
can fix it, we will.
will.
If we can't, we'll let you know that as well.
Right, but you're very responsive, so in case anyone's listening.
Thank you.
Steve?
Okay, I'll go with it. Thank you. I've really enjoyed working on safety. I learned a lot. And one thing you didn't really touch on, one thing I like about the PEDs is someone stops, the pedestrian stops and pushes the button, and they become responsible for it. And we have a lot of near misses that don't get reported. Do you see any future of even more PEDs getting around town? Because we have an awful lot of intersections
The
that are.
next one that's definitely on my list is Summit and Franklin. Because that is when commuters come off the train. I know they're used to travel, crossing in New York, in Mass and everything, and they're usually in dark suits or dark dresses and dark raincoats. And to the point that you mentioned before, if you're going to go out and walk or run, light yourself up. A lot of times you'll see people and you drive by them, and you're like, I didn't even see them as you pass them, because they're in total darkness, and they're out walking the dog, so they know they're going to be a pedestrian. Throw a vest on. You can buy the vests now, or a belt, a little blinking light. There's so many things that could actually save your life. So with that, the blinking lights are big, but Summit and Franklin is one that would definitely be on my list.
But to your point, the personal accountability for the pedestrian is.
Yeah, we'll do what we can do, but
Yeah.
it's teamwork.
Anyone else? Any members of the public? Okay. Thank you very
Yep,
much,
you're
Chief. Okay.